I was out and about today and decided to get a pizza from this Italian restaurant that I really like a lot. That when you taste the crust, you taste that it's actually made with real olive oil, not the fake stuff that's been watered down with canola oil or vegetable oil. And the crust is homemade and it's simple. It's just olive oil, water, flour, and whatever else. But there's no like byproducts or processed ingredients, and it's just straightforward and reminds me of a glimpse of my childhood when food was actually food. And so while I was waiting for the pizza to get ready, I ordered it to go. I bumped into somebody and we got into a conversation. And this gentleman told me about his work history and his life story. He was working at a different restaurant and trying to entice me to eat there and showing me the menu and things like that. As we started talking, we had a couple of things in common. He used to work in my home state, Texas. Hey, Texans, how you doing? And the restaurant that he worked at was in Dallas and Austin and Frisco and some other places that he listed off, but cities that I was very familiar with. And as we were talking, he told me the name of the restaurant, and I had literally never heard of it. And he was surprised because this was like, he was like, "Oh, you're from Texas too? Oh my goodness, yeah, you probably know the place that I told you the story about, da da da." And then he told me the name, and I literally, it's not even, I had never even seen it, never heard it, and it was apparently this chain, this famous chain that he was like, I had just recently met somebody else from Texas like a week ago. And they were like, "Oh, you worked at that restaurant. Oh, really?" And then, "Oh, the Frisco location. Yeah, at da 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 da." And, listed off the address. And so I had a choice, right? Where I was like internally thinking to myself, should I talk about reality shifting and the fact that I might be from a different dimension? Or should I just pretend like I'm stupid? Sometimes that's good for you. And I'll talk about that in a second. I don't mean that like in a negative, underhanded way. I mean, sometimes it's actually advantageous. Really, it is. But so it's like, should I just like play it off and be like, "Oh, da 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 da." And I made the decision to catalyze my actions in the universe as a reality shifter and to continually build a presence and a manifestation in the material world as a reality shifter. And part of that is when you are certain that that is a role and an identity that you want to take on, let other people see you in it or know about it. Drop little hints. I was at a Thanksgiving dinner this past year, a friend's Thanksgiving, and talking to some new people, and we got into a conversation about parallel realities and worlds. And this is before I started this podcast, right? I made the decision to make a joke about it. And then that opened up a conversation thread that we all talked about it for like 30 minutes and playing with the ideas and then making jokes between each other. And then saying, there's another version of us existing right now where X, Y, and Z happened. We didn't have dessert, at the end or whatever it was. And it was fun. And they got to see me as a reality shifter because I got to introduce them to some of these ideas, saying that it was all a hypothesis, right? And that is an example of letting the world see you, which has this feedback loop. So this series started with the episode Roles and Identities. And in that episode, we talked about understanding who you are as it relates to the world that you're building, the world that you're existing in, the reality that you are tethered into is very much dependent upon your identity and your roles. because this governs your behaviors. This governs how people see you. It creates this feedback loop, right? So now we're taking that concept of removing identities that you don't want to be seen as, shifting away from identities that don't really fulfill you, and stepping into a new identity as a reality shifter, and letting the echo of that identity reach outward in this circle around you as when the moment feels right. And not every moment is correct to do this. As you introduce yourself, or when you have one of these moments, you have one of these opportunities. Oh, I've never heard of that restaurant. Really? It's kind of famous. How? And then my first reaction was like, well, I haven't been to Texas in a while. They're like, how long ago? And I was like, 4 or 5 years. And they're like, you should still know about it. And I was like, well, I'm a reality shifter, and it's a new thing. I teach about it, actually. And I'm from a different dimension, and these sorts of things happen when you start reality shifting and exploring different dimensions. There's a restaurant in one that's famous, but you're from another one where it doesn't exist. It's not super common, but it happens. And he was like, oh, I understand. And then I wasn't really sure if he did understand, and I was like, reinforced it. And then, we said goodbye, and that was that. And as I walked away, I felt my vibration. I did an alignment check. This is really important. Like when you start speaking your truth, feel it out. Make sure you're in the right place to do so, because some places don't honor honesty, and it can get you in trouble. And it can actually, it can get you in a lot of trouble depending on where you're at and who you're talking to. So just be very mindful of your audience and where you're at in space and time. Like, if you're talking to somebody official from a binary society, they have a uniform and the ability to put you away. Maybe you just want to keep it cool, like binary style, not quantum style. Unless you want to explore some of those institutions, and then go for it. There's adventures to be had everywhere, right? And witnesses are needed everywhere. So now let's talk about a different example of when you may not want to share. So a couple of days ago, I was walking my usual haunts, and I ran into this cook of a restaurant that I pass by all the time. And I hadn't seen the cook forever, and we would run into each other like a couple times a week. And it's been 3 weeks, and I haven't seen him. And he's told me about this new chapter that he was going to embark on. So I just assumed that he left town and went to, embark on that new adventure. But when I ran into him, I asked him about the restaurant because I have seen it closed, and there's no, every time I've gone by in the last 3 weeks, it has been dead and no sign, no indication of when they're coming back. It looks like it never existed. And so, because they had a little portable sign, they don't have a sign that decorates their restaurant on the outside that's there constantly. And so when they pull all of their signage in from the sidewalk, it looks like just a random door. So I asked him, I was like, hey, what's going on with the restaurant? Did it close? And he was like, no. And this is when I had an incongruency. So it's very important to pay attention to these. He was like, no, I'm there. And I'm like, what? Every day? And he was like, yeah, I'm working by myself now. And presumably now I guess they gave him a key, because I used to always see him outside. Well, when I would pass, I would see him outside around the time of opening Like he didn't have a key. And so I guess now he has a key. And he told me that he's there all the time. It is open, but he has to step out and buy stuff. And then he showed me this bag of ingredients that looked like it was his personal, I don't know, this was the narrative that I had. I could be wrong. It looked like his personal shopping because the stuff is not on their menu. Maybe they've, and it's like, I'm not even going to say an example. It's not really that important. It doesn't look like it was stuff for the restaurant, but I could be wrong. Anyway, so I had this moment where I had to check myself and realize I have two explanations for this. And my mindset is a problem here because I got the feeling that he was lying to me. Because I've worked retail before. It's been a long time, but the amount of times that I've passed by, and even today, like when I was out getting the pizza, like I passed by and it was the whole time closed. And then I passed by again, and it was still closed. And so it's like, I'm either reality shifting to where the restaurant is closed in one version, and in the second version, he's lying to me about it, which is not a reality that I'm really comfortable to be in because it reminds me of how unconscious people live, you know, where they create an illusion and they sell you on the surface. And they're like, no, yeah, I'm here. You must be a crazy one, you know? Like, you think it's closed. Your eyes are deceiving you. Like, yeah, no, I'm just out buying ingredients all the time. Literally, like all the time, right? And that's what people, when they're unconscious, do. You know, they lie, they cheat, they steal, they betray you, they stab you in the back. You know, it's this whole charade. But on the surface, they're smiling to your face. I'm guilty of this too. You know, like, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's going good. How are you doing? So great to see you. You know, like that's a little bit of that shadow. But when we start talking about unconscious behavior, then it's like that, but magnified. It's like people will actively be enemies with you, or like presumably this guy is trying to destroy the business at some level. And I don't know why, but I've met the owner and I have to say that I don't get good vibes from them. I just don't. And I actually actively have felt really uncomfortable in their presence. Anytime that I was there and the owner was there, I was looking for the exit door. So it could be that there's this rift going on between them and the cook has now won their trust and now is delivering karma or a wake-up call by ruining the business. I don't know. I'm not involved in any of those plays and dynamics. But in that reality layer, what made me uncomfortable is this trying to sell a narrative of an illusion. Like, no, I'm there. I don't know why you're coming by every time that I'm not. Okay. And I equate that with people that are deep, deep, deep in their shadow and not very trustworthy. And actually, if you confront them, will become your enemy just because you're calling them out. You know, it's so crazy when you call people out when they're in their shadow, it's like you try to turn on the lights and they're like, God, I'm a vampire. How dare you? And then they start attacking you or villainizing you or whatever it is. It's like, okay, all right. Yeah, we got the memo. You are unconscious. Congratulations. Next. So there are two options there. And the other explanation is that something doesn't make sense. We take him at face value, surface value. And we say, okay, something isn't reconciling here. So it could be that he's either being deceitful, or it could be that there's a reality spinoff layer that the restaurant actually is closed. Which one is it? I don't know. So when we talk about becoming a reality shifter, we need to honor where we're at, which is this is a new emerging field. And that's why there's a lot of misinformation. It's because we're figuring it out as we go. There's not a school for reality shifting. You can't sign up in college to take a reality shifting course. So you have a lot of people that know that they're experiencing it and that are talking about it and that are putting frameworks around it in a way that makes sense. They're testing it and then they're sharing it. And we're no longer keeping things siloed like we used to. So we're figuring things out as we go and we're sharing things along the way. And that means we're going to get it wrong sometimes. And there needs to be a certain level of understanding about how knowledge comes into fruition. So we don't go blasting creators who are excited to share with us what they perceive as happening. And so as a result, I think it's important to honor that there are still open questions. And we need to remember where we came from, which is we're at a point of transition, of evolution. And so that means that we come from a step down and we are in a day-to-day moving into a step up. So sometimes we're going to be down, sometimes we're going to be up. And it's this beautiful vacillation between old mindset and new mindset, old mindset and new mindset. And we need to actually normalize this experience because when you become a reality shifter, you're going to go through this. And it doesn't mean that it's not working. It is an element of your cognition that is currently in the process of being upgraded. And so now we have a situation where it's why can't I say that? Ambiguous. It's ambiguous. Is this person lying? Or is there a reality share? Is something not reconciling? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Where my mind goes is that he was lying. Because I could also kind of feel it too. And then where my mind goes is, that's not really a place that I want to stay in or be enmeshed in. And there are reasons that you cruise through reality layers that are not going to be your home. There are actually a lot of reasons that we'll cover later. Sometimes you're going to be in places where you have to teach people. And so you'll be in a place temporarily so you can do your teaching assignment, or you'll have a rotation, or you might have a passion project or a soulmate, or it might be a convening place because you're going to meet a destiny encounter that is going to take you to a new lifeline. And so when you're in places that you identify as not really wanting to stay in, especially by observing people's behavior, their standards of behavior, what I find is really powerful and very helpful is to just play dumb. Just play dumb. And be like, oh, yeah. And this is what I did with him. I was like, oh, Oh, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, okay, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna go about my day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice to see you too. Okay, okay. A little bit of shadow there, right? That's surface level shadow. We are taught from a young age how to be polite and how to be nice. And so when we see people and we have an encounter that we're kind of iffy about, we're not like sticking them to the wall and making them explain themselves. Instead, we're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yep. Yeah, nice to see you too. So that's where using normalcy can be your friend. And that's also why it's important to really think about how and when you share about your reality shifting. Because let's say now that you are this business owner, and let's say that actually my read on you is different, that you're actually like a really kind-hearted person with a lot of empathy, and you just want to make good food and serve it to your community, and you hire a cook and you think this cook is trustworthy, and you finally give them a key to the restaurant, and all of a sudden it's like the business goes away. Maybe you're out of town and you're trusting that this person is going to be a good steward of your restaurant. And you're like, where are the sales? And like the volume drops tremendously. And the cook's like, I don't know. There's just no people here. It's like tourism is down. It's not really customers, the weather, whatever it is. And then you ask yourself, do you want to invite this person to all versions? Let's say you figure it out, right? That they're actually sneaking off, pretending to open up the restaurant. They're sneaking off to have an affair, a liaison. And the work is now just a cover for the fact that they're having an affair with somebody else and they don't want their spouse to know. Is this the type of person that you want to invite to manage all of the restaurants and all of the reality layers? Is this the level of consciousness that you think should get a golden ticket to some heaven-like reality experiences? Because at some point, we are raising our standards of living, right? Which means we have to raise our standards of behavior. And that means we have to raise our standards of integrity. Case in point, there is this woman who I don't know what it is. We just don't vibe. She's such a great person. Also on the consciousness is spiritual journey. And every time that we meet each other, the conversation just doesn't flow and it feels very forced. And so the last 2 times that I've seen her, so the first time I was repelled, but I was like, okay, let me go ahead and cross paths and say hello. Like, I don't want to be rude. This is my conditioning, right? I was relieved when I saw that she was repelled too, and she quickly went a different direction when she saw their paths were going to cross. And I was like, thank God, I don't have to have an awkward small talk conversation. And then that got me thinking, I'm like, okay, so I still have some shadow that I have to work on, which is my authenticity level and the politeness that governs my behavior that creates friction, and this is just the level of shadow work that I'm doing. It's very subtle now, where now it's like I'm challenging myself to be really, really, really authentic. And today, I also saw this woman again, and I was prepared to just wave and not do the paths crossing, but either she didn't see me or she put up a barrier that was like, we're not even going to wave, which I was fine with, actually. There's been no fighting, no tension, nothing like that. It's just there's a resonance disconnect. There's just a disconnect. And I find it really hard to talk with her. And as a result, the version of me that comes out is kind of like an older, inauthentic version. You know, it's like I'm putting on an old suit of how I used to live. And that's driven her away. So I'm not unhappy about this. But when we are talking about levels of authenticity and integrity, this is what I mean, right? It's like not pretending to enjoy somebody's company when you actually don't enjoy their company. Not pretending that you're opening up a restaurant when you're really not, you know? Not pretending that you're buying ingredients for the restaurant that looks like it's your personal groceries and so on and so forth. Because at some level, we feel each other beyond the surface. And this is the 5D experience. And I just got into a conversation today where I could feel somebody's energy. And I've never met this person. I've never had any interaction with them prior to this comment section, this comment thread, and I could feel them. And so it tells me that the reality that at least I'm shifting into, aside from apparently this one that I visited, who knows, is leveling up to where it is going to require that transparency, because people are going to feel your every intentions and emotion, and not all the time, not everybody. You're not going to be like at a ball game and everybody's going to have their eyes on you. It's not like that. But when you are having significant interactions and significant moments with other people, strangers, friends, loved ones, there is a revealing of who you actually are. So the surface level BS that we used to do is no longer going to fly. And that's what I mean about really understanding who you're talking to and where you're at as you are reality shifting. Because there are some places that maybe you don't want to invite everybody into your house, especially if they're vampires or werewolves, right? And so maybe we need to exercise a certain level of discernment. And so although it is great to become a reality shifter and to express that and let the world see you, when you detect that you are in a place that is heavily unconscious, or when you are around modalities of behavior that you find to be unacceptable, it is okay to shut the door. Listen, so if you would like to work one-on-one, I am a reality shifting coach. I would love to potentially work with you. We can experiment on your techniques, definitely dive deep into your shadow work. It's kind of a specialty of mine. I love it. It's fun when we can laugh about it. Feel free to reach out to me, sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com. Okay, we'll talk soon.